Dominican Friars in Rwanda. Meditation on the feast of St. Thomas. Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger into the nail marks and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Brothers and sisters, was this Thomas' request not reasonable? In fact, would it not be absurd to commit one's whole life following someone that you have seen dying and who is said to have risen from the dead without a minimum of tangible proofs and without making a personal experience of that? Could we allow ourselves to assert that Thomas' doubt translated his lack of faith in Jesus or his unbelief in the omnipotence of God capable of resurrecting his Son? You know, some people define faith as a kind of inner feeling based on convictions received from others or personally acquired over time. Others might understand faith as a risk. The risk of believing, says the title of a book. Yes, you could say that to believe in God requires the ability of taking some risks. But in this sense, faith would be a risk especially for God. The risk of being ignored, rejected, betrayed, and despised by his own human creatures. But for us, brothers and sisters, having faith in God is rather a blessing, a grace, but also a challenge. A challenge because our faith is always under the assault of doubts, which made someone say one day that from the very beginning of the belief in God, doubt has always inserted itself inside faith. But let us not forget that there is doubt and doubt, and that the doubt of the skeptic has nothing to do with that of the believer. And when it happens to us to have some doubts against our faith, it is not the doubt of the unbelievers or the skeptics that is about, except that we may not be aware that our own doubts are there to push us to have a reasonable faith and to avoid acquiring blind faith. Thus, the believer who has never experienced the temptation of doubt may have only simple convictions. And the difference between conviction and faith is that doubt can be a poison for conviction, but a food for faith. In other words, doubt is the risk of a living faith. And where doubt never creeps, there may be only dead beliefs, dead convictions. So, to come back to Thomas' doubt, let us note that through his attitude, Thomas simply wanted to make and live his personal experience of the risen Lord, without being satisfied only with the words of the other disciples. And in these, brothers and sisters, we can learn from Thomas how to live our own experience of the risen Lord in order to become true witnesses of the victory of life over death and of good over evil. So may the prayers of St. Thomas help us to acquire a living, convinced, and convincing faith. Amen.